I will mention one thing that's a very common efficiency tactic called the consent agenda, which is very popular among nonprofit professionals and governance consultants. The consent agenda groups together the routine items such as approval of the minutes, program reports, etc. Groups those together into one motion. It's distributed in advance. And then the first thing, or one of the first things that happens at the board meeting, is a motion to approve the consent agenda. And at that point, board members can either vote to approve, or if any board member wants to speak up and say, I think this one item needs to come out of the consent agenda for full discussion, that there's an opportunity to do that. But the good part of it is it takes these things that you could go sideways, getting into a discussion on every little point. It gets this stuff out of the way and onto the more substantive business. So it can be a very good efficiency tool. Where you need to be careful as an organization is, number one, understand that the consent agenda process relies on an assumption that the board is going to look at these things in the consent agenda and really examine them and really think about them prior to the meeting. So it assumes some front end work. And that's the whole point, as I understand it. The board puts in that work on the front end, and then we don't have to spend the meeting on it. But the preparation and the reading needs to be there. And if it's not, then maybe you're skimping and just kind of not reminding the board as well as you should remind them. And number two, I'll say before I get your input, Mike, I've seen organizations sometimes struggle with, should this go in the consent agenda or should it not? Does this need its own item? Just take, for example, an amendment to a policy or an amendment to the bylaws or something like that. Things of substance like that really are kind of changing something in a meaningful way. I err towards making them their own agenda item. But if you've just kind of made clerical adjustments, very minor things, okay, consent agenda is fine. That's my view on it and a rule of thumb and where I lean. Mike, what do you think about consent agenda and any other efficiency tips that you can share?
Ben, I don't know if you're going to agree with this statement, but you and I have been doing this a while. We've done a lot of planning tips. This is probably like one of the top planning tips we could be out there that have huge impact on adding consent agendas. Step number one, a mini planning tip around that, real quick. A lot of groups don't use it. Take a look.
Yeah. Right.
If yours not using it, you can put one toe in the water and start using it for some really mundane stuff. Okay.
Right. Approval of the minutes, that's a no-brainer.
A couple, just like you said, housekeeping things and such. The second thing you can do is do consent agendas on the content can be rolling. So look at the program reports. Especially a middle or large size organization might have 4 or 5 key programmatic areas. The board cannot always hear from like the program departments. So I like to I roll those. So over a year's worth of board meetings, we'll have 2 departments report and the other 6 are in the consent agendas.
Oh, I see.
And so we're sort of rolling them and everybody gets to have a voice and we're smart about it. Like a certain department where that meeting is, the planning is going on or something, they're going to report at that time, on a set schedule.
Yeah, just Mike, because this is an important tip, just want to make sure people caught that. Yeah. When you say rolling it, if you've got 4 different departments for a few different programs you have, and I don't know, maybe fundraising is its own department. Most of those, 3 or 4 of them will go in the consent agenda during one meeting. 1 or 2 of them will get the spotlight at the meeting, and be highlighted. Then the next meeting, they might go in the consent agenda and another department gets up and speaks. That's a really good tip to make sure other people are hearing from everybody, but you don't have to cram everybody in to every single meeting.
It's a win-win on so many levels.